Whenever we picture the Supreme Court, the image is almost always the same. It's static. It's quiet.
Very formal.
It's 9 people in black robes sitting in this marble temple, seemingly removed from the messy, dirty reality of regular life.
Right. We imagine them operating on this high plane of pure logic, like they're solving a complex math problem where X equals justice.
That is the popular mythology. The judge as the oracle, channeling some divine word of the law, totally untouched by human emotion or, prejudice.
Yes, exactly.
But then you run headfirst into a guy like Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. And if you just look at the sheer timeline of this man's life, it completely destroys that image of the static, removed judge.
Oh, it shatters it.
I mean, the scope is actually hard to wrap your head around. We are talking about a human being who, through his father, was literally 1 degree of separation from John Quincy Adams.
A founding father's son.
Right, and yet he was still writing opinions and influencing law while Franklin Delano Roosevelt was rolling out the New Deal.
It is a staggering bridge. He effectively spans the entire transformation of America. He starts in the era of the quill pen and the horse-drawn carriage amidst the chaotic, formative years of the early republic.
And he finishes his career in the age of the telephone, the radio, and the industrial welfare state.
And he didn't just live through it, he shaped it.
Yeah.
He is arguably the most cited, most famous judge in American history.
People call him the Great Dissenter. He's held up as a hero to progressives. But, and this is the thing that really helped me when I started reading the source material, he is a walking, talking paradox.
He is a massive ball of contradictions.
He doesn't seem to fit into any modern political box at all.
That is the most important thing to understand about him. If you try to label him a liberal or a conservative by today's standards, you will fail. It just doesn't work.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is the godfather of free speech, the guy who basically invented the protections we rely on today.
The marketplace of ideas.
Yes, yet he also wrote the opinion upholding the government's right to forcibly sterilize women.
A truly chilling opinion.
He's celebrated as a champion of the common man's right to pass laws, but personally, he was a cynical, aloof aristocrat who thought most people were, frankly, idiots.
He had a very, very low opinion of the average intelligence, yes. He was not shy about that.
And he didn't believe in natural rights, the idea that we're born with these God-given protections, yet he's the reason we have so many of those protections enforced today. So I think the mission for this deep dive isn't just to list his cases.
No, that would be missing the point.
It's to figure out how these contradictions coexist. We want to understand how the physical, bloody trauma of the American Civil War took a young, starry-eyed idealist and hammered him into the most cold-blooded, realistic, legal mind of the 20th century.
It is fundamentally a story about trauma. You cannot understand his jurisprudence, his theory of law, without understanding the mud and the blood of 1862.
So the war didn't just change his personality.
No, it changed the way he viewed the entire concept of truth. It changed his whole philosophy of life.
So let's unpack this life. We've got biographies, legal opinions, his personal letters, which are incredibly revealing, by the way.
They really are. He was a phenomenal writer.
Where do we even start with a character like this?
To understand the fall, you have to understand the height from which he fell. We have to start in Boston, specifically in 1841. Holmes wasn't just born into a good family. He was born into the absolute apex of the Boston Brahmin society.
The Brahmins. Okay, so these are the old money intellectual elite.
The absolute top of the social and intellectual pyramid. The people who thought Boston was the hub of the solar system.
And his father, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., was essentially the sun at the center of that hub.
A perfect way to put it. He was a physician, but more famously, he was a poet and a celebrity intellectual. He wrote The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table, which was one of the most popular books of the entire era.
Wow. Imagine growing up in a house where your dad is nationally known as the Autocrat.
It has to do something to your ego, right?
I would think so.
It was a household of immense pressure and immense idealism. The family friends weren't just neighbors. They were the giants of American thought.
Like who?
Well, Henry James Sr., for one, and of course the big one, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Young Wendell, that's what the family called him, grew up swimming in the waters of transcendentalism.
Okay, give us the quick refresher on transcendentalism. It's more than just nature walks, I assume.
Laugh a bit. In this context, it was a belief in the inherent goodness of people and nature. Ideally, they believed in natural law.
Capital N, capital L.
Exactly. They believed that there were universal moral truths, truth with a capital T, that governed the universe, and that if you were smart enough and moral enough, you could discover them. It was a world of high moral philosophy and really deep optimism.
So he's a young man, incredibly smart, ambitious, and he's taught that the world makes sense. It operates on moral rules.
And he was cocky, too. There's a fantastic anecdote from his undergraduate days in Harvard. He writes an essay criticizing Plato.
Bold move for a college kid.
It is. Now remember, Plato is the foundation of idealist philosophy. He's the ultimate idealist. And Holmes, being a bold undergraduate, decides to take him on. He takes this essay to the family friend Ralph Waldo Emerson, probably expecting a pat on the head.
Look, Mr. Emerson, I took down Plato.
Basically. And Emerson reads it, looks at this young man, and delivers one of the coldest lines in literary history. He says, "When you strike at a king, you must kill him."
Ouch. That's not good effort, Wendell. You missed, kid. Don't even try.
It was a lesson in humility, but it also shows Holmes's nature. He wanted to slay dragons. He was an abolitionist in his youth, a fervent one.
So he had that fire, that belief.
He did. He served as a bodyguard for Wendell Phillips, the radical abolitionist, during dangerous protests in Boston. He was filled with what he would later call fighting faith. He believed the North was right, the South was wrong, and that the universe cared about the difference.
And then the universe showed him it didn't care at all. The Civil War starts.
April 1861, Fort Sumter. Lincoln calls for volunteers. Holmes is fresh out of Harvard, full of that Brahmin idealism, and he immediately commissions in the 20th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry.
And we need to pause on the 20th Massachusetts. This wasn't just a random assortment of guys.
No, not at all. It was known as the Harvard Regiment. These were the sons of the elite. These were his classmates, his cousins, the golden boys of Boston society.
So they all marched off together.
We marched off to war thinking it would be a noble crusade. A glorious adventure. They had no idea they were walking into a meat grinder.
And Holmes, he didn't get a desk job. He didn't get a safe staff position because of his dad's fame.
Far from it. He was a line officer. He was in the thick of it from day one. And when we say trauma, I want to be specific because the textbooks often just gloss over this. Holmes was wounded 3 separate times, and these weren't grazes.
Okay, let's walk through them because I think the physical reality of this is what breaks his idealism. You can't just read about this, you have to feel it.
The first was the Battle of Ball's Bluff in October 1861. It was a tactical disaster for the Union, a total rout. They were backed up against a river, getting slaughtered.
And Holmes is right there.
In the middle of it. He takes a bullet directly in the chest.
In the chest.
It entered his chest, missed his heart by a fraction of an inch, and passed through. He fell to the ground, coughing up blood.
He must have thought that was it.
He did. He was dragged to a boat to be evacuated. He later wrote about lying there, convinced he was dying, and clinically checking his own pulse, wondering what the transition to the other side would feel like.
How old is he?
He was 20 years old.
Wow. And that's the first one. He recovers, which is a miracle in itself, given 1860s medicine, and he goes back.
He goes back. He feels it's his duty. September 1862, Antietam. The single bloodiest day in American history.
Right.
The 20th Massachusetts is maneuvering through the famous cornfield. It's just chaos. Smoke, noise, bodies piling up everywhere. And Holmes is shot through the neck.
The neck. I mean, the psychological impact of that. You survive a chest wound, you go back, and almost immediately you get hit in the throat.
The bullet passed right through. He carried the actual bullet with him for the rest of his life. He scrawled the letter home in pencil, stained, saying, "I am not dead yet."
Unbelievable.
But the recovery was brutal. They treated the wound with iodine, which was agonizing. He couldn't speak. He just lay there in a field hospital watching the casualty list come in, seeing the names of his friends, the boys he grew up with, being crossed off one by one.
And yet he goes back again.
He does. Chancellorsville, 1863. This time, he's shot in the heel. His foot is mangled. And while that sounds less lethal, the infection risk was enormous. Gangrene was a death sentence.
So it's not just the wounds, it's the constant threat of disease.
On top of the bullets, he suffered a near-fatal case of dysentery. He was essentially wasting away for a time. He watched his best friend in the regiment, Henry Abbott, take command and then get killed. He saw the Harvard Regiment decimated. Over half the officers he started with were dead.
This is the crucible. You go in believing in natural law and truth, and you spend 3 years seeing that bullets don't care about truth. They don't swerve for the righteous.
That is exactly the lesson he took away. It killed the idealist. It burned it out of him. He realized that natural law is a fantasy. In the cornfield at Antietam, there was no higher moral order. There was only force.
There was only power.
Exactly. The side that won wasn't the side with the better arguments or the holier cause. It was the side that could mobilize more men and kill more people. Full stop.
It sounds incredibly bleak. It sounds like he became a nihilist.
Not a nihilist, but a profound skeptic. A realist in the starkest sense. He came to believe that what we call rights or morality are just the preferences of the people who have the power to enforce them.
The winners.
Winners write the law. Years later, he gave a speech called The Soldier's Faith. It is haunting. He talks about the experience of war not as a crusade for justice, but as throwing away life in obedience to a blindly accepted duty for a cause one little understands.
Blindly accepted duty. That's terrifying. It's not, I fought to free the slaves. It's, I fought because I was standing in a line and I didn't run away.
Correct. He replaced morality with duty. He decided that since you can't know the ultimate truth of the universe, the only honorable thing to do is to do your job, to be a professional, to execute the will of the sovereign, whether that sovereign is a general or later the majority of voters, without asking too many questions about whether it's right in a cosmic sense.
It's just about function, doing the task at hand.
Precisely.
Before we see how that shaped his law career, we have to touch on the Lincoln story. Because it's the only time these two massive figures intersect, and it's wild.
It is part of the Holmes legend. So, the Battle of Fort Stevens, 1864, the Confederates under Jubal Early launch a surprise raid and actually get within sight of the Capitol dome.
The war was almost over, and suddenly the Confederates are at the gates of Washington.
The city is in a panic, and President Lincoln rides out to the fortifications to inspect the defense.
He's the only sitting president to come under enemy fire, right?
Yes. And he's not exactly subtle. He stands up on a parapet. He's 6'4", wearing a stovepipe hat. He is the most obvious target in the history of warfare.
Like a carnival game.
And bullets are thwacking into the wood around him. A surgeon standing just near him gets hit. It's an insane situation.
And Holmes is there.
Holmes is a young staff officer by this point.
Yeah.
And the story goes that he sees this tall idiot standing in the line of fire, doesn't realize it's the president, and shouts, "Get down, you damn fool."
Can you imagine? You're a 23-year-old kid and you scream, "You damn fool," at Abraham Lincoln.
And the legend says Lincoln got down, looked at him and said something like, "Captain, I am glad you know how to talk to a civilian." Now, we have to be historically responsible here.
Okay, what's the fact check?
Holmes was a bit cagey about this later in life. Sometimes he said he shouted it. Sometimes he said someone else shouted it. Sometimes he implied he just wished he had shouted it. Other sources suggest he might not have even been at that part of the fort that day.
Look, if I'm 90 years old and people ask if I saved Lincoln's life by calling him a damn fool, I'm saying yes.
He certainly didn't deny it too hard in his later years. But, true or not, the image captures the essence of Holmes. He respected the office, but he saw the man, even the great emancipator, as just another organism vulnerable to a bullet.
Right. It reinforces that fragility of authority. Even the king can be killed if he stands in the wrong spot.
And in war, everyone is standing in the wrong spot.
So the war ends. Holmes survives. He goes back to Boston, traumatized, hardened, and needing a job.
He considers philosophy. He debates with his friend William James, the great pragmatist philosopher. But his father, the autocrat, steps in again. Holmes famously said his father kicked him into the law.
Didn't think it was a worthy profession.
His father didn't think Holmes could make a living at philosophy, so he goes to Harvard Law School.
And this is where the conflict starts. Because the way law was taught back then was, well, it wasn't what Holmes experienced in the mud.
It was the absolute antithesis of the mud. The dominant figure in legal education at the time was Christopher Columbus Langdell, the dean of Harvard Law.
Okay.
And Langdell viewed law as a hard science, almost like geometry or botany. He believed there were a set number of legal axioms or principles. If you learned the axioms and applied pure logic, you would always get the right answer, every time.
So A plus B equals justice. It's a closed system. It's clean.
Exactly. It was called the case method. But the point was to distill these pure, timeless rules from the cases. If a real-world case didn't fit the logic, Langdell would say the case was wrongly decided. Not that his theory was wrong.
The world is messy. The logic is pure.
It was beautiful, elegant, and completely detached from reality.
And Holmes looks at this and says, this is garbage.
He looks at it and says, this isn't how the world works. He saw it as a kind of intellectual fantasy. He spends his evenings grinding away, reading historical law reports going back centuries, and in 1881, he publishes The Common Law.
And this is a big deal.
It lands like a bomb. The opening paragraph contains arguably the most famous sentence in American legal literature. The life of the law has not been logic. It has been experience.
Okay. The life of the law has not been logic. It has been experience. Let's dig into that mechanism. What does he actually mean when he swaps logic for experience?
He means that judges aren't logic robots. They don't just solve equations. He argues that the law is a result of the felt necessities of the time, the prevailing moral and political theories, public policy, and even the prejudices which judges share with their fellow men.
Okay, give me a concrete example. How does a logic judge differ from an experience judge?
Okay, let's take a simple contract dispute. Imagine a merchant agrees to ship 1,000 barrels of flour by a certain date, but a hurricane, an act of God, delays the ship.
Right.
A logic judge, Langdellian, might look at the strict text of the contract, apply a rigid axiom about absolute liability, and say, "You promised, you didn't deliver, you're ruined." He would destroy the merchant regardless of whether that makes any sense for the shipping industry.
Because the rule is the rule. The logic is pure.
Right. But Holmes would look at experience. He'd ask, what is the custom in the shipping business? What does the community expect? What serves the felt necessities of commerce? He might rule that the storm excuses the delay because that's how the real world operates. The law has to adapt.
So he's saying law isn't a suicide pact with logic. It's a tool for governing real people.
That's the essence of it. He's admitting that the law is made up. It's not sent from heaven. It evolves as society evolves. If society wants to burn witches, the law figures out a way to burn witches. If society wants to build railroads, the law creates rules to protect railroads.
And this leads to his bad man theory, which I think is one of the most provocative ideas he ever had.
It is. It's from his essay, The Path of the Law. Holmes poses a question. If you want to know what the law is, not what it ought to be, whose perspective should you take?
And most people would say, the good man, the person who wants to do what's right.
Because a good man looks to the law for moral guidance. But Holmes says no. A good man has a conscience. He'll do the right thing even if there's no law against it. He doesn't need the law to tell him not to be a jerk.
Okay, so who do we ask?
If you want to know what the law actually is, ask the bad man. The bad man doesn't care about morality. He doesn't care about your axioms or your high-minded principles. He only cares about one thing.
If I do X, will the police take my money or put me in jail?
That's it. That is the question. The bad man only cares about the material consequences of his actions.
So to Holmes, the law is just a prediction.
That is his literal definition.
Ah.
The prophecies of what the courts will do in fact, and nothing more pretentious, are what I mean by the law.
But wait, doesn't that encourage people to be bad? If I tell you, hey, the law isn't about right or wrong, it's just a calculation of risk, aren't I basically telling a corporation, go ahead and pollute the river as long as the fine is cheaper than the filter?
Holmes would say. They're already doing that. He's not telling them to do it. He's describing what is already happening. He just wanted to strip the moralizing language out of the law. He hated words like malice or rights because they confuse us. They blend law and morality.
How so?
Take the concept of negligence. Imagine a workman is repairing a roof. He throws a heavy wooden beam down into the street below. He doesn't check to see if anyone is there.
Okay, not a smart move.
The beam hits a passerby and kills them. Now, let's say the workman is, in his heart, a gentle soul. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He feels terrible. He just wasn't thinking. A moralist might say he had no malice, so it's just a tragic accident.
But the dead guy is still dead.
Exactly. Holmes says the law doesn't care about the workman's soul. It creates an external objective standard, the reasonable man.
Okay.
It asks one simple question. Would a reasonable person have known that throwing a heavy beam into a street is dangerous? If the answer is yes, you are liable. Maybe you go to jail. It doesn't matter if you're a saint internally. The law judges external conduct, not internal sin.
It's the soldier again. The bullet doesn't care if you're a nice guy. The law can't afford to care either.
Precisely. It's cold, it's objective, and it's entirely focused on predictable consequences.
So this reputation, this legal realism, makes him a superstar in the legal world. He sits on the Massachusetts Supreme Court for 20 years. And finally, in 1902, the call comes. Theodore Roosevelt needs a Supreme Court justice.
And the politics here are fascinating. TR is a force of nature. He's a progressive, he's a trustbuster, and he's an imperialist. He wants a judge who aligns with his vision of a strong American empire.
And he looks at Holmes and sees what?
He looks at Holmes, the Civil War hero, the patriot, the guy who talks about duty and the power of the state and thinks, that's my man, he gets it.
He thought he was hiring a political ally.
He thought he was hiring a rubber stamp for his agenda. And boy, was he wrong.
What happens?
Almost immediately, they clash in a massive case called Northern Securities v. United States.
Explain the stakes here, because Northern Securities sounds dry, but this was the Google or Amazon antitrust case of its day.
Huge stakes. Northern Securities was a massive railroad monopoly controlled by J.P. Morgan and other tycoons. They controlled the entire transport infrastructure of the Northwest. TR wanted to break them up to show that the government was stronger than the corporations. This was the centerpiece of his presidency.
And he expects Holmes to back him up. Go get him, Tiger.
The case is argued. The court rules 5-4 in favor of Roosevelt, and Holmes dissents.
He votes against the president.
He votes against the president. He looks at the Sherman Antitrust Act and says, strictly as a legal matter, this law doesn't ban this kind of stock ownership. These guys found a loophole. It's not my job to close it. It's Congress's job to write a better law.
TR must have gone nuclear.
He was apoplectic, absolutely furious. That's when he delivered the famous line, "I could carve out of a banana a judge with more backbone than that."
Backbone of a banana.
Wow. But the irony is, Holmes showed immense backbone. He stood up to the president who appointed him and the entire progressive movement because his legal theory, read the text, don't invent the law, demanded it.
He wasn't a political player. He was a legal professional.
He was doing his job as he saw it.
And that independence brings us to Lochner v. New York in 1905. This is the case that made him a legend.
It is the most famous dissent in American history, no question.
Set the scene.
Okay. New York passes a law saying bakers cannot work more than 60 hours a week or 10 hours a day. It was a public health measure. Bakeries at the time were essentially dungeons, flour, dust, coating the lungs, extreme heat from the ovens. People were dying young.
So the state steps in to protect them. Seems reasonable.
But the bakery owners sue. They argue that the Constitution protects liberty of contract. They say, if a baker wants to work 80 hours a week to make extra money, the state has no right to stop him. That's his liberty.
And the Supreme Court majority agreed. They bought that argument.
They did. They struck down the law. They said the 14th Amendment protects your fundamental right to buy and sell labor however you want. It was a huge victory for laissez-faire capitalism.
Yeah.
This era of the court is now called the Lochner era because of it.
And Holmes dissents. But, and I want to be really clear on this, he doesn't dissent because he feels sorry for the bakers.
Right.
This isn't a bleeding heart moment for him.
No, and this is the aha moment for understanding Holmes. He probably didn't care about the bakers at all. He personally liked laissez-faire economics. He privately thought the law was paternalistic and silly.
So why support it?
Because of judicial restraint. He believed in democracy, or at least in the power of the majority. He wrote in his dissent, the 14th Amendment does not enact Mr. Herbert Spencer's social statics.
Who was Herbert Spencer?
Spencer was a social Darwinist, the ultimate champion of laissez-faire. So Holmes is saying the Constitution is not a textbook for one specific economic theory. It's a framework for people of fundamentally differing views to fight it out.
He's saying, it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what the people of New York, through their elected legislature, think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He referred to the public privately as the crowd or thick-fingered clowns. He didn't respect their intelligence, but he respected their power. If the mob in New York elects a legislature, and that legislature wants a 60-hour work week, and the Constitution doesn't explicitly forbid it, the judge needs to shut up and let them have it.
That is a fascinating nuance. He defends the people's rights, not out of love for the people, but out of a refusal to play God from the bench.
It's the bad man facing the majority. He knows the majority has the power. The law should reflect that power, not the judge's personal economic theories.
So for decades, this makes him a hero to the left. He's the guy saying, let the state regulate business, but that same instinct, let the state do what it wants, gets really complicated when we talk about free speech.
It does, and Holmes's evolution on free speech is one of the most dramatic character arcs in legal history, because he did not start as a free speech warrior. Not at all.
No. Let's talk about Schenck v. United States. 1919, World War I is raging.
The country is in a state of high anxiety and patriotism. The government passes the Espionage Act. It makes it a crime to, among other things, obstruct the draft.
Okay.
Charles Schenck is a socialist. He prints 15,000 leaflets telling young men, the draft is slavery. Do not submit to intimidation. Assert your rights.
So he's not blowing up bridges. He's handing out pamphlets.
Correct. He's arrested. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And Holmes writes the unanimous opinion, upholding the conviction. He sends Schenck to jail.
Wait, the great dissenter, the free speech guy, sends a guy to prison for a pamphlet.
He did. And this is where he coined the phrase everyone knows but almost always misuses. He wrote, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic."
Everyone quotes that, shouting fire in a crowded theater. But they use it to defend free speech limits. Holmes used it to jail a socialist for his political opinion.
Precisely. He formulated what became known as the clear and present danger test. He said if your speech is of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger of bringing about substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent, like, say, stopping a draft in wartime, then the First Amendment doesn't save you.
It's the soldier again. We are at war. You are hurting the war effort. You go to jail. It's a very pragmatic, non-idealistic view of speech.
Yes, but then the pivot happens.
Yeah.
And it happens incredibly fast. Just months later, in late 1919, the court hears Abrams v. United States.
What are the facts in Abrams? How are they different?
Very similar. On the surface, a group of Russian Jewish immigrants in New York throw leaflets out of a factory window. They are criticizing President Wilson for sending American troops to Russia to fight the Bolsheviks. They call for a general strike in munitions factories.
So more leaflets, a slightly different message.
Right. The majority of the court looks at Schenck, looks at Abrams, and says, well, Holmes just gave us the rule. This is a clear and present danger. Guilty. 20 years in prison.
20 years.
20 years in federal prison for throwing leaflets out a window. But this time, Holmes switches sides. He dissents.
Why? What changed in 6 months?
Two things, probably. First, the facts were slightly different, and he saw the difference. These guys were nobodies. Holmes called them puny anonymities. He looked at their silly leaflet and thought, this isn't a clear and present danger. This isn't a threat. Nobody is listening to these guys. The Republic isn't going to collapse because of some Russians in a loft.
Okay, so a difference of degree. And the second thing?
Intellectual pressure. In the summer of 1919, Holmes was hanging out with young, progressive intellectuals like Harold Lasky and, crucially, a Harvard law professor named Zechariah Chafee. And Chafee had written a very influential law review article criticizing Holmes's reasoning in Schenck.
So they basically sat him down and said, hey, Ollie, you got this one wrong.
In a very polite, academic way, yes. There's a story about a tea party where Chafee gently cornered Holmes. He argued that free speech wasn't just about the speaker's right. It was about a social interest. Society needs to hear all ideas. If you silence criticism, you lock the country into error. You prevent society from finding the truth.
And Holmes, at age 78, listened. He changed his mind.
He listened. And in his Abrams dissent, he writes what I consider the greatest paragraph in Supreme Court history. He completely reframes the First Amendment. He introduces the marketplace of ideas.
Can you share some of it?
He writes, when men have realized that time has upset many fighting faiths, they may come to believe that the best test of truth is the power of thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, and that truth is the only ground upon which their wishes safely can be carried out.
Time has upset many fighting faiths. That line gives me chills.
It goes all the way back to the Civil War. He had a fighting faith in 1861. The Confederates had a fighting faith. He saw that history destroys absolute certainty. So his logic becomes, since we can never be 100% sure we are right, we must allow a free trade in ideas.
So we have to let the bad ideas into the market.
Yes, because the only way to prove the good ideas are actually good is for them to survive the competition. We have to tolerate speech we loathe.
It's a defense of liberty based on skepticism. It's not let them speak because every voice is sacred. It's let them speak because we might be wrong.
Exactly. It is humility born of trauma. The Constitution is an experiment, he says, as all life is an experiment. You have to let the experiment run, even if it's dangerous.
It's beautiful, it's inspiring, but we promise a deep dive. And deep dives have to look at the shadows.
They do.
We have to talk about Buck v. Bell.
We do. And this is where the listener might want to brace themselves. Because the same philosophy that gave us the marketplace of ideas led Holmes to a very, very dark place.
The year is 1927. The eugenics movement is, well, it's popular. It's mainstream among the intellectual elite.
It was considered settled science by the elites at Harvard and Yale and Stanford. The idea that we can breed better humans and stop the unfit from reproducing was seen as progressive.
And the state of Virginia passes a law allowing the state to forcibly sterilize feeble-minded people in state institutions.
And they need a test case to make sure it's constitutional. And their test case is a young woman named Carrie Buck.
Who was she?
Carrie Buck was an inmate in a state colony for epileptics and the feeble-minded. The state claimed she was the daughter of a feeble-minded mother, and that she herself had given birth to a feeble-minded, illegitimate child.
So they're arguing there's a pattern of genetic defect.
Yes, they wanted to cut her fallopian tubes against her will to prevent her from passing on her defective genes to a fourth generation.
But before we get to the ruling, we need to clarify. The facts of the case were a complete lie, right?
A total fabrication. A sham. Historians later uncovered the records. Carrie Buck was likely of normal intelligence. She had been institutionalized to hide the shame of being raped by a relative. Her child, who the state's expert called feeble-minded at 8 months old, actually went on to make the honor roll in elementary school before dying young. The case was a setup to get a legal green light.
But the Supreme Court didn't know that or didn't care to look too closely.
They took the record as it was presented to them.
So the question before the court is, can the government surgically mutilate a citizen for the benefit of the gene pool?
The vote was 8-1. Only one dissenter. And Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. wrote the majority opinion. He upheld the sterilization.
How does the man who protected the puny anonymities in Abrams justify this?
It connects directly back to the soldier. It's the same cold logic. Listen to his reasoning, he wrote. We have seen more than once that the public welfare may call upon the best citizens for their lives.
He's talking about the draft. He's talking about Antietam.
Yes. He's saying, look, the state can force the best and brightest young men to go die in the mud for the collective good. If we can ask that ultimate sacrifice, surely we can ask for a lesser sacrifice sterilization from those who sap the strength of the state.
It's logically consistent, but it is morally horrific. We can kill you for the state, so we can definitely sterilize you.
And then he delivers the line, the one that stains his legacy forever. Referring to Carrie Buck, her mother, and her infant daughter, he wrote, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough.
3 generations of imbeciles are enough. It's so cruel. It sounds like something a villain in a movie would say.
It is the bad man theory applied to biology. It reveals the danger of his judicial restraint. Remember Lochner? He said, if the majority wants a law, let them have it. Well, the Virginia legislature, representing the majority, wanted eugenics, and Holmes deferred to them.
So he didn't see a natural right to bodily integrity that trumped the state's interests.
He didn't believe in natural rights, period. He believed in the power of the state to ensure its own survival.
But wait, hold on. In Abrams, he protected the minority opinion because we might be wrong. Why didn't he apply that skepticism here? Why didn't he say, hey, maybe our science about eugenics is wrong, so we shouldn't do something irreversible to people?
That is the great contradiction, isn't it? When it came to ideas, Holmes was a skeptic. He thought ideas, even bad ones, couldn't hurt you immediately. But when it came to biology and survival, he was a scientific materialist. He looked at society like an organism. If a limb is gangrenous, you cut it off. He trusted the science of his day way more than he trusted political speech.
It serves as a profound warning, doesn't it? If you divorce law entirely from morality, if you remove that sense of conscience, you can rationalize atrocities with perfect, cold logic.
You absolutely can. Buck v. Bell is the shadow of legal realism. It's what happens when you view humans merely as biological inputs in a state machine. The Nazis later cited Holmes' opinion at the Nuremberg trials to defend their own sterilization programs.
That's horrifying. So, moving toward the end of his life, the man just kept going. He stayed on the court until he was 90 years old.
He set the record at the time. He became this wizened, mustachioed sage of Washington, a living legend.
But he had one more gift for us, a very important one. Silverthorn lumber.
Ah, yes. 1920, The Fruit of the Poisonous Tree.
Sounds like a fantasy novel title. What's it about?
It's a crucial Fourth Amendment doctrine. The feds had illegally raided a lumber company without a warrant. They seized all their papers, took them back to the office, copied them, and then a court ordered them to give the originals back.
Okay, so the company gets its stuff back.
Right, but the government said, fine, we gave the papers back, but we're going to use the copies we made to prosecute you.
So we cheated, but we're keeping the info we got from cheating.
And Holmes, writing for the court, said absolutely not. He ruled that if the source of the evidence, the tree, is tainted by an illegal search, then the evidence you get from it, the fruit, is also tainted. You can't use any of it in court.
Why not?
Because, again, he's a cynic about power. He knew that if you let the police benefit from breaking the law, you are incentivizing them to break the law. The only way to stop the bad man with a badge is to make his cheating useless.
It's incredible. The father of modern free speech, the father of the exclusionary rule, and the author of Buck v. Bell.
He retired in 1932. On his 90th birthday, He gave a radio address to the nation.
Which is just wild in itself. Born in 1841, broadcasting on the radio.
He quoted a Latin poet about death. Death plucks my ear and says, "Live, I am coming." He was ready. He was not afraid.
And when he finally died in 1935, just days before his 94th birthday, his executors went through his apartment, and what they found really brings this whole story full circle.
In his closet, hanging there after 70 years, they found his Civil War uniforms.
The ones from the 20th Massachusetts.
Yes, they were still stained with his own blood. They were torn by the bullets from Ball's Bluff and Antietam. He had pinned a small piece of paper to them with a note about the battles where he was wounded.
So he was the great dissenter, the Yankee from Olympus, the great legal philosopher. But when you strip it all away, he was always that soldier.
He was the soldier who survived when his friends didn't. He viewed life as a war and law as the rules of engagement for that war.
He also left his money to the U.S. government, didn't he?
He did. He left the bulk of his estate to the United States. He famously said, "Taxes are what we pay for civilized society." He believed in the project of America, even if he thought its citizens were thick-fingered clowns.
So let's bring this home. What is the takeaway? How do we synthesize this man?
Holmes reinvented American law. He smashed the old idea that law was a static, logical science and showed us it was a living, breathing, messy thing born of experience. He forced the law to look at the world as it is, not as we wish it would be.
But he also showed us the danger. He showed us that experience without a moral compass, without a belief in fundamental human dignity, can lead directly to Buck v. Bell.
Correct. It's a double-edged sword. But I think his greatest legacy is that question he poses to all of us in his Abrams dissent.
Time has upset many fighting faiths.
Think about that, you, the listener. Think about the things you're absolutely certain of today. The political views you would scream at a stranger on the internet over. The ideas you think are as solid as natural law.
Holmes asks, do you have the courage to treat those beliefs as merely fighting faiths? Can you admit that just maybe in 50 years, the marketplace of ideas might prove you were wrong?
It is a terrifying question. But in a polarized world, full of absolute certainty, it might be the only question that can save us.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the life and mind of Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. It's a lot to process, but that's why we do this. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.